Hello, YouTube. I hope you folks are well. I'm going to start here with another Singularity Let's Play. Now, this will probably be a shorter one. Er, you know what? I shouldn't turn this down too much. Because when you turn the volume down too much on some videos, I'm finding that YouTube gets a poor audio sample and sometimes copyright flags things based on songs that aren't in the video because they're similar enough. It doesn't help that sometimes it turns out some of these game videos use snippets of other songs in their creation. So, you know, it's a different song, but it's possible that the creators of the game music soundtracks may have actually done something they shouldn't have, or maybe they got it licensed or something. But it's having problems with some older Real Politics videos. For instance, it turns out there's a song called War or something. I don't know. It's by this Farwez, some rap guy. He either took snippets of the same song that was like public domain and used pieces of it in his, or oh yeah, that's the other thing. Sometimes there's a public domain thing and a motif of it gets used in two different songs, and the song you're using is not copyrighted, or it's, you know, it's part of a game and it's been the game studios have managed to, like, they don't go around disputing flagging stuff that's of their game. But some other artist used a snippet from the same public domain thing they did, and then YouTube will go flag it. And those artists, some of them are in bad faith. Some of them do this intentionally. They create stuff this way so they can try and steal monetization from things that aren't using their song. I mean, it's always, I found, it's always these no-name rappers I've never heard of who do it, with these really, like, scumbag fly-by-night publishers. They're always the ones that get these clearly bad faith copyright claims on some videos, and you'll listen and like, that sounds kind of similar, but it'll turn out that the song that was actually used predates their song, so they're the ones doing copyright infringement of some other song that you had the rights to use, and then they're copyright disputing you because they can try and claim monetization if your videos are monetized. It's theft. Scumbags and really dirty studios that will work for these people, you know, they know they can get away with it because who's going to stop them? There's no punishment for them for doing it. It's the people who are actually, you know, creating content, using stuff that they have a legal right to use. They're the ones who are getting screwed by this. Of course, I don't have anything monetized yet, so they can't try and steal monetization because my videos aren't monetized, but I suspect as soon as I do, they'll be trying to do it. And then sometimes YouTube just straight flags a video that's not even at all similar to the one that's used, to music that the music isn't even remotely similar, and it still gets flagged. And then these scumbag fly-by-night studios, these rappers who include a lot of motifs that I think they're almost designed to flag a lot of things that aren't. It's not even similar. You listen to the song and you're like, that's not even similar, but it still gets flagged, and then they still try and back the claim. Again, it's theft. It's theft on a considerable scale on the internet, and they get away with it. They probably think they're, quote, hustling or something, because a lot of people at the bottom society think this is fine, this kind of thing, if it helps them survive, and it plays into, like, the systematic injustices in the United States. People are doing this often from oppressed populations, and so they, you know, are struggling to survive. So there's some exculpatory That's not the right word. There's some extenuating circumstances, but it's still wrong that they're going around claiming stuff that is not their music. Sometimes it doesn't even sound like their music. And then, like, apparently, like, you can dispute YouTube copyright claims. What I'm saying is they will then hold to their dispute, and YouTube won't even, they don't, when the people making the claim dispute the dispute within 30 days, they just pretty much, they never ever actually look into it. They just go with the studios. These scumbags just spend time on YouTube and just click dispute to all, basically, and they're insisting that stuff that isn't even using their songs is using their songs. And YouTube never, well, they're fly by night, so maybe they do eventually get banned for it, but then they just do it again with another song. I don't know. It's annoying. It's particularly annoying when it's not even, I'm not doing music videos, I'm doing gaming videos. So having louder music may at least reduce the chance of something being flagged as being the same song that clearly isn't. Of course, sometimes there are certain companies like, Electronic Arts will actually use copyrighted music in their games, and they'll even put it in their freaking terms of use that you can't monetize videos based on, which is some obnoxious bullshit. So it's, but this hasn't been the case of any of the times it's happened to me. I don't play any EA games on YouTube. Yeah, I do own some, but I've never done a video of a single EA game, and after finding out EA does that, it's a disincentive to ever do videos of any of their games. That being said, I was thinking about doing a SimCity 4, which was made after EA bought the studio, or no, wait, that's Maxis. It was always an EA studio. But anyways, so I may run into those kind of issues. May just have to mute any songs that get flagged, because EA is scum. Even though fair use is supposed to protect gameplay videos, YouTube never backs it. What they don't want is obviously someone just loading up a game and doing nothing and playing videos so that people can listen to the song. That's obviously a copyright infringement. But if someone's actually playing a game, that's supposed to be fair use. But again, EA has an exception to that fair use in their terms of use, just so they can get easier access to stuff. EA is a scumbag studio, though, and that's not normal for the industry. EA and I think Blizzard does that too. These two giant companies. I don't play their games generally. Their games are shit anyhow. But EA used to make some good games back in the day. But I think this is before they revised the terms of use this way. So those might be under a different terms of use. I'm not sure if the terms of use are retroactive to games that were made way back when they actually did some good work. But I don't think EA has released a single good game in the last 10 years. Everything they release is just garbage, and you shouldn't spend money on it. Honestly. And I don't have money to spend unless something is going to be something that can grow my YouTube channel I can potentially monetize. So, yeah, fuck EA. They're the most cancer studio in the entire gaming industry. Anyways, yeah, but with my real politics video, I was listening. I'm like, yeah, that's using a snippet that's identical, even though it's not the same song. But I don't know if the game music from Real Politics was using one from if it's a case of common source, like they're both pulling from something else that's on their domain, or if it's this scumbag fly-by-night rapper who's creating things that are using snippets from other things and then claiming that other people are infringing on his copyright when he's actually infringing other people's copyrights. Because I've seen that happen before. I don't know. Trying to get more familiar with stuff and find all the pitfalls, but it's tough doing YouTube. I mean, unless you're doing like unless you're like a pretty woman and you're just doing vanity makeup videos, those seem to sometimes go viral super easy. But there's nothing I could figure out that I could do that could easily catapult to even getting to monetization, and all the while I'm having to deal with all these like bad faith fly by night fake copyright infringement things and such. I mean, it doesn't affect me yet, but because none of my videos are monetized yet. But it's bullshit when you get flagged for using a song you're not even using. It's terribly programmed AI that YouTube has, and that's what people take advantage of with these songs that are sometimes designed to flag lots of other stuff. Like I said, it's always rappers. Every single time I dealt with this kind of stuff, it's always a rapper doing a video, and it's like usually a remix of other people's songs, and then he goes, then the owner of the rapper's IP, whatever publisher they're working for, claims other people are infringing the rapper's copyright, but he's actually the one remixing someone else's music. That's the most common thing I've seen. It's like, fuck these people. Seriously. Anyhow, enough venting about that. I guess doing the music exploration event had this a little more on my mind, plus having just submitted disputes I'm sure YouTube will not back. That is, they won't allow me to get the copyright thing pulled on the video even though it shouldn't belong. You can't even hear the music, that's the thing. Like, it's turned so low that it can't be heard, and so you're getting very, like, poor quality audio sampling, and then the AI is flagging other songs that aren't in the video, but have little snippets that are identical. And I don't know how that ended up, the little snippets, but I wouldn't be surprised if this rapper was remixing somebody else's work. So, all right. Well, let's see. Other stuff on the mind. I did a bunch of Stars videos recently, and I've been dealing with issues of, for any of you play Stars, you have some idea what I'm talking about. For the rest, I'll try and explain it very succinctly. There's Origins, which are like the backstories to an empire. It's kind of a 4X game, but more unique. That's all I can say in 4X games. Is like every empire starts from the same place. One of the backstories is Knights of the Toxic God, and you start with like an Order habitat, which is basically a space station that's got people living on it permanently, and like they can grow food in hydroponics. You can choose how you use the space. Like I had some space dedicated to like a nuclear reactor and the orbital habitat for a while, and I'm like, nope, that's actually a bad use of space, because it doesn't provide much. It's like actually a reactor district, so there's a little housing, which I guess for the reactor workers, but obviously there'd be an exclusion zone where the radiation is too intense for people to safely live, even with the shielding within a certain distance of the reactor, I guess. But which is to say, it doesn't provide that much housing, and it was actually hurting population growth. And the technicians, well, they were providing less economic value. I ended up finding out than squires, which is a different job. It miscalculated their value when I built the reactor dissertation to never even invest the resources in it. But but the relation there I was saying is to crime, because squires indirectly reduce crime on the space station, and the technicians indirectly increased it because basically all pops generate a certain amount of crime in proportion to their happiness, or inverse. So if they're really unhappy, they generate a lot of crime, which is to represent like, are they barely surviving? And driven to like crimes of desperation or people happy and well cared for. So like providing higher living standards increases pop happiness, reducing the crime per pop. But yeah, I was having crime problems because the border habitat was getting a lot of people, and I would either had to dedicate a lot of space in the space station to a police station basically, or just make a deal with the crime lords, which is what I did because space dedicated to more enforcers would have meant fewer knights, and would have the squire jobs act as amplifiers in the knights, multiplicative. So you know, if you have enough squires, each knight is twice as valuable, kind of thing. And the more knights you have, actually, the more valuable each squire is. It's kind of a can really get out of hand when you have a whole bunch of knights and a whole bunch of squires. But anyways. So yeah, I ended up doing a deal with the crime lords, but it couldn't help but think in that game there was some commentary there on how, well, I mean, just taking a purely punitive approach to crime isn't particularly always effective. The way the game handles stuff, it encourages you to provide high living standards to people. Social welfare is one of the higher living standards. That's usually the optimum in that game. I mean, it's a game made by a studio that's it's headquartered in Sweden, although I think that particular game is actually made by like a branch in Belgium. So those are social democracies. That makes sense. They would lean that way. And even I was actually running a Civic that had like a universal genetic database on every citizen, which actually improved the effectiveness of law enforcement. Even then, it wasn't worth putting extra resources into enforcement. The optimum was, well, because of a bug, not doing any enforcers, but if there wasn't that bug, it would have been to have a minimal number of police and then just make a deal with basically the mob bosses to not go like shooting people in the habitat streets or whatever, to, you know, keep their activity to things that don't disrupt economic activity and destabilize the political climate too much. Because you can get some really nasty modifiers if you don't do that, and crime is high. Like, you can get gang wars, mob rule, drug cartels, like all these things. If you make a deal with the crime lords, the only modifier you can get is the crime lord deal itself, which adds criminal jobs. So some of your population won't work anything productive. They'll just be career criminals. And you can get a criminal underworld, which adds even more criminal jobs. But neither of those are nearly as bad as some of the other things, which can hurt stability and can lead to assassination of planet governors and stuff. Yeah. One of the better ways it was recently added that game deal with crime is you can have replace enforcers like civil educators, basically. It's more, you know, humanistic approach. I don't know if that's right. No, humanism is a term that's often misused. That's not a good correct use of that term, even though some people think it is. It's a more humane approach, though, to law enforcement, and it actually works very well. Ironically, by these educators, state educators they're called, which do a little bit of kind of forestry education, so I guess it's not that, you know, they're not like still arresting criminals, but it's a crime system much more focused on rehabilitation than honestly just cruelty and breaking people's wills, which is like if you live in the US, the criminal air quote justice system, not just at all. It's honestly, it's a one part sadism that some people get a thrill out of causing pain and suffering to others. And I'm talking some of the scumbag politicians. I'm talking some very right-wing voters who just want to see people suffer. And of course, like some of the prison guards and cops in our society, they're fascists basically, but they're sadistic. So it's one part sadism, and it's one part just breaking the will of people. Not coincidentally with over-enforcement of laws against the poor, disabled, minorities, breaking the will of these people by systems. They're like American prisons turn people into like broken human beings who are actually more likely to commit crimes, not less. Because the point of the system is not actually to prevent crime, it's to neutralize any ability of certain groups of people to resist the power of the ruling elites by marginalizing and making people feel powerless. And in many cases, many times, you'll see laws that try and actually strip people who've been convicted of crimes from ever being able to vote again, which is the most obvious example of how the system in the US is really about political oppression. This country has had some serious problems for a long time. Trump has only brought a lot of these things to the forefront, made it more obvious, said the quiet part out loud, and made certain things undeniable that were always true. And ironically, he's actually accidentally done a few good things. Like, he got rid of US Aid, and people were like, oh, that's terrible. US Aid was not this organization that's helping people around the world like they try and portray themselves. They were providing aid to far-right dictatorships and collaborator regimes in exchange for, often the way it works is something like this. These regimes are fiercely oppressive and kleptocratic. They steal money like crazy because the governments that these collaborator regimes run are so deeply corrupt, so ineffective, and so obviously evil. The only way they can hold onto power is by putting massive money into their military and police forces relative to the size of their economy. These are usually poorer countries. And what's not put in, they provide very favorable conditions to U.S. multinationals. They will kill people who try and form labor unions, so wages are very low. So they let lots of value be sucked out of the country. And what's not sucked out, they steal. And then what's not stolen for like personal embezzlement or sucked out of the country by giving sweetheart deals to U.S. multinationals, that money is put into police and to military. So they provide almost no like health and human services to their people. So how does the country not collapse? Because it would without those services. They get aid from US Aid, and then US Aid doesn't just, we're filling a gap. You might even still justify its existence. No, they've sometimes outright trained torturers and murderers and assassins. This is most obvious when they directly supported the Guatemalan genocide in the 70s. In the 1970s, USA did that. They actually provided childcare to the families of police officers who were literally out there arresting Maya natives, because it was a genocide of the Maya people in Guatemala. And they were literally basically subsidizing the salaries of the police and the military who were committing the genocide at the time. And even more ridiculous, in it was Uruguay and Paraguay, they had this US Aid expert who was going around teaching local police forces how to torture people and how to identify dissidents. And this was a US Aid official, and he was doing this openly. The US government knew about it, and eventually he got kidnapped and executed by a group of Marxist guerrillas in Uruguay. But he had made the rounds Paraguay, Uruguay. I think it was Uruguay, was it Paraguay? God, I mix them up sometimes. But one of these tiny Latin American countries. But he had made the rounds 7 countries before somebody finally put an end to his essentially mass murder, because he was training police officers to disappear, torture people, and to kill them, ultimately. Not justifying what the guerrillas did, but it was expected. I mean, how long are you going to do something like that before somebody's going to get angry enough? But that was US Aid. That's the point. And yeah, they're an evil organization, so corrupt there was no reforming them. It's not like you can cleanse their legacy. It's one of those organizations that does need to be disbanded and rebuilt from the ground up. And ironically, Trump got rid of it because it's politically unpopular on the right to provide foreign aid, even though this foreign aid was mostly going to far-right dictatorships. But right-wing ideology is often internally contradictory or self-defeating like that. Of course, I think he kind of didn't fully eliminate in the end, but he drastically cut its funding, and not all the money went to like these dictatorships. Like the media was highlighting like a HIV clinic in South Africa, which is actually a left-wing country that's not oppressing its people. We're not talking like apartheid, we're talking modern South Africa. Apartheid was cruel and evil. Modern South Africa is trying to repair the damage. So the media kept talking about this one HIV clinic was closed, but they were keeping mum essentially about like, you know, the money that was going to subsidizing the militaries of U.S. puppet regimes kind of thing, which still exists in the third world and Latin America. A lot less than there used to be during the Cold War, because the U.S. empire is falling apart and countries are getting out from under the boot of the CIA. That's been happening for decades. History repeats itself, or at least rhymes, as Mark Twain said. And what's repeating itself now are this exact pattern happened to the Roman Empire before it collapsed. I know comparisons to Rome are overplayed, but the Roman Empire, after certain points in history, stopped annexing territory, like the U.S. stopped expanding its borders after certain points in history, and instead it went and basically built what were basically like neo-colonial regimes today. Countries that were not officially part of the Roman Empire, but you had these kind of like military death squads that would go outside the borders of Rome and kill tribal leaders who were not cooperating, and often it was slavers and merchants who would actually more directly provide Roman control, though sometimes they would literally send administrators into this area, and sometimes it could be a prelude to annexation, like Varus, the guy who famously got several Roman legions destroyed in the Battle of Teutoburg Forest. The Romans have been dominating this area of Germany for generations, and then they said finally, okay, we'll actually annex it directly, which in a way would have been a good thing, because at least it would have put a stop to the constant like slaver raids into the area that the Romans were doing. Like, people would have actually ended up less oppressed as Roman citizens than they were as people just outside the borders of Rome who were being horribly oppressed by the Romans. Sometimes they would put administrators in an area and not try and annex. But anyways, anyone who resisted these encroaching like administrators, merchants, slavers, military death squads in the Roman military would come on and assassinate tribal leaders, usually tribal leaders, because this was parts of like Germany and the steppe and North Africa, just outside the borders of the Roman Empire. But over time, they lost their grip on these areas. These peoples eventually got out from under their boot. And then when the Roman Empire was declining militarily and economically a little bit later, and the Huns came along, part of what helped drive this decline, actually, it's thought by some anthropologists and historians, Jared Diamond particularly leans into this theory, although he's not well respected in academic circles, is climate collapse. The Romans deforested so much land that actually changed rainfall patterns and caused some rivers to not have as much water for irrigation as they did, and some lakes to dry up. So lack of fresh drinking water, lack of water for irrigation, reduced rainfall, reduced crop yields, and this is part of what drove the decline of the Roman Empire, because they overexploited their environment to the point where like agriculture productivity was lower than if they had just kept some of the forests around and had less farmland. Like less total crop yield despite having more acres under tillage, because this is something that's understood today. Like in the US, if you go to any farming part of the country, I know not a lot of people have been these places. I've lived in some of these areas. There's always little patches of forest that are left that are intentionally not destroyed because they're important for climatic stability. Farmers know this. They act as windbreaks, and they provide habitat for often like birds that will come and eat certain insects that will otherwise destroy crops, and they help maintain rainfall patterns. if you chop down these last little specks of forest, you'll get climate collapse. This was discovered the hard way with the U.S. Dust Bowl, where they did chop down every last tree, and then they got the Dust Bowl, and Oklahoma's agricultural productivity has never been the same since. It's always been much worse than it was before then. Like the whole Dust Bowl states, their permanent climate collapse has not recovered now, like 100 years later even. I mean, maybe technology has meant that even this degraded land is more productive, but the base productivity level of the land, the base fertility of the land is still far less than it was before the Dust Bowl. It'll pretty much never recover, or not for thousands of years or something. So yeah, the Romans drove climate collapse on themselves, but there were also social decay factors. There were declining tax revenues. People like to emphasize, you get right-wingers and they try and blame like LGBTQ individuals in the Roman Empire, which is bullshit. Those people are always around. They didn't increase in number. And this is partly driven by early Christian churches trying to blame those individuals, because there was a deeply anti-sexuality and anti-LGBTQ undertone to Jewish religious practice at the time, and early Christianity came out of Jewish religious practice. So this, like, awesome misogyny, it's not even supported in the religious texts. It was just the culture of the time. I mean, it's not even, this isn't something about, like, modern Judaism has moved beyond this. We're talking what it was in the year, like, 50 BC. And Christian culture came out of that. Yeah, because Christianity actually started to diverge even before Christ a little bit with John the Baptist. And you start to see certain segments of Judaism diverge into what becomes Christianity. It's not the way it's portrayed in the Bible exactly, because, you know, the Bible's an imperfect record of history, to say the least. But yeah, but this misogyny, anti-LGBTQ thing led people to blaming, oh, it's the gays and the women. No, the real cause of social decay was overcrowding in the cities, corruption, the government offices that were supposed to be providing services like education, because yeah, the Romans had education institutions, although they were not like free, but they did have like state subsidized scriptoria, they were called, or scriptoriums. They were essentially places where huge legions of scribes would copy documents, but to train those scribes, a certain level of education was available to those who could afford it. But the government subsidized these educational institutions, and then on top of that, people still had to pay for the education. But, you know, anyways, but the government had duties in like firefighting, policing, education, a certain amount in healthcare, a lot in sanitation with like the aqueducts, roads. And what started happening is rich people got so much of the wealth of the Roman Empire because income inequality skyrocketed. Sound familiar? And the rich people stopped paying their taxes. Sound familiar? And government revenues came under serious strain, especially with high inflation. Sound familiar? And the government services got increasingly cut back. At the same time, there was increasing corruption in government expenditure, which I'm not sure has occurred to the same degree until Trump, at least. We're starting to now get out of control corruption with Trump, but that hasn't been true historically. The U.S. corruption has been lower because there's so many agencies who existed just to prevent at least the illegal type of corruption, because there's been a lot of legalized corruption and bribery in the forms of politicians taking campaign donations, and campaign donations that aren't money that goes into their pocket, but they were also getting money in their pocket through insider trading, book deals, and speaking fees, among other things, and also like vacations that billionaires pay for them to take and such that the personal wealth of anyone who was in Congress long enough would be in the millions. I mean, that's been the case for a while. That's legalized bribery. It may be legal, but it's wrong, and it's corruption. It's bribery. I don't care what you want to call it. So there's been a lot of legalized corruption, but now the illegal sort of corruption is becoming more common, especially as like the white collar crimes division, which was already slashed by previous Republicans, is being slashed again. And white collar crimes division investigates all sorts of fraud and theft, and that can include stuff that involves the government. That of the FBI I'm referring to. And they're redirecting FBI resources to immigration stuff. So anyways, but yeah, skyrocketing corruption, declining tax revenues. It led to cutbacks in services. It led to, for instance, the aqueducts not being maintained as often, and sometimes they would get clogged because they weren't being cleaned regularly, and or the water would get like become unsanitary and people would get sick. Less pickup of trash and refuse around the city, which attracted rats, which led to a series of plagues, overcrowding, with crowding the poor, who, remember, skyrocketing income inequality, being crowded into very, very crowded tenement housing conditions where the crime was rampant because there wasn't much policing, and people didn't have much economic opportunity. Like whole sections of Roman cities ended up run by organized crime gangs, essentially. Although, as it just goes to stars, sometimes that may have been, in some ways, better than complete anarchy in those areas. The government's so dysfunctional it can't deal with crime. It may be better off making deals with the crime lords, which is essentially what the Romans did, actually, is they would make deals with some of these gangs where, as long as they kept their areas of the cities reasonably functional, the Roman, like, urban prefects would stay out of those areas, those districts. But these were still usually slum districts. And yeah, so many of these things are happening today. Overcrowding. I mean, there's a housing crisis in the U.S., which is causing people to cram into worse and worse and tighter and tighter housing conditions. Like where I am now, I can't afford. Honestly, it should be affordable, but it's not. And this is partly because housing prices are so high, so that like on Airbnb, and the guy had to pay a small fortune for the property, more than he should have because of the housing crisis. Then he passes it on to tenants. So I'm gonna have to downgrade to somewhere that's more of like a slum condition, because otherwise I'm not gonna be able to, keep a roof over my head. Because all I'll be able to count on is like probably SSI, which is like $967 a month. That's not enough to pay rent in most of the US these days. It was not too many years ago, but inflation has outpaced the SSI. And disabled long COVID, I can't work much. I may be able with employers who make accommodations, and I mean accommodations like, all right, I can do maybe a 4-hour shift a couple times a week, because I do more than that, it gets some post-exertion malaise. But I would have to be able to sit down every hour approximately. Like most jobs, and I've worked jobs like this, you'll work an 8-hour shift, you get a lunch break, and you get 1 or sometimes 2 other breaks. So you have to work at least 2 hours between breaks. I can't do that. I will get lightheaded and dizzy. I need breaks at least once an hour, maybe every 45 minutes, which is more than twice as many breaks as you normally would get. Employers don't want to provide twice as many breaks. They don't want to fully schedule me for no more than 4 hours at a time, and not be able to schedule me more than 2 or 3 shifts a week, because otherwise my health will collapse. That's the level of function I have with long COVID, and I would still need some other accommodations. Sometimes I would get migraines where even when not a scheduled break, I would just need to go into a dark room for like 5 minutes, or they wouldn't be able to function. That long COVID comes with sometimes these occasionally horrible migraines. I haven't had one in a while, but I would say they come in spurts 2 or 3 times a year, and usually they'll be like a period of like 2 or 3 weeks where I get a lot of them, and then they'll go away. Yeah, so I can't make what's considered substantial gainful employment income, or you can't do what's considered substantial gainful activity. That's the bureaucratic term they use for you're fully disabled. You can't make enough off employment to come anywhere close to sustaining yourself. And to even get that level of employment, I need disability accommodations, which most employers will try not to provide by discriminating and hiring against disabled people. That is, they make excuses not to hire you in the first place. Often they don't even have to provide an excuse. You submit an application, they just never call you. They'll ask questions like if you need any accommodations, and then they just conveniently call no one who says they do, that kind of thing. The way to get around that is if you can get, I'm trying to get a society hammered out, if you can get that approved, which the bureaucrats throw up all sorts of obstacles because bureaucracies have been designed to do this, to fuck with people. There's what's known as a ticket to work program where as Social Security will actually connect you with these special disability employment networks that basically they have lawyers on staff to make sure employers don't discriminate against disabled work applicants. And because they just specialize in getting disabled people jobs, they're able to actually do it a fairly high level of success. Of course, they mostly just take your earnings out of your SSI check, so you actually don't come out very much ahead, which makes it tough when, again, the SSI check isn't enough to pay rent. To even keep your head above the water. It's a bad situation. That's why I really need something like I need YouTube to succeed. Or I need for a country to accept political refugees, because I do fear political persecution. If the country keeps going the way it's going, I'll be rounded up and probably killed as a socialist eventually by Trump-type people. So, like if Sweden started taking refugees, they go there in a heartbeat. If they started accepting refugee applicants in the US, I mean, as soon as I was legally able to have to get a passport and stuff, but as soon as I was able to, following the law, do that, I would do it because, Sweden is an example of a country that signed on to the United Nations, Convention on the Rights of the Disabled. Not every country has signed on to it. I don't think the US has, actually. I would have to check. Maybe it has. It's meaningless in the case of the US, because one of the stipulations is that if you take refugees from a disabled country, because this doesn't require countries to have a special means by which disabled can get entry to the country in the first place. So, I can't get a work visa because I can't work. I can't get a family reunification visa because I don't have family in these countries. And some countries have right of descent, but I don't have family that's recently enough from any country. My family's been in the United States for hundreds of years, so none of that would qualify. So I have no way to move those countries unless they start accepting refugees. But the United Nations Convention for the Rights of the Disabled, or whatever it was called, it's something very similar. That's not the exact term. It says they can't discriminate against disabled. So if they accept refugees from the United States, for instance, they have to accept disabled refugees just as willingly as other refugees, and have to treat them the same as their own citizens in terms of access to social welfare programs for the disabled, which means if I went to Sweden as a refugee because I do legitimately fear political persecution, I would be eligible for social welfare programs that support disabled, so I'm not living homeless. And things like job retraining, so that I could retrain in skills that there are some jobs I don't have the skills for, now the money to do the retraining for, but that theoretically I could retrain to do certain jobs that I could work from home. I don't have the aptitude for computer programming, but accounting maybe. I'm good with numbers, but I can't afford to do an accounting program, even a community college one. It's too much money. That would be cause my savings to deplete. I think I might technically have the money, but then my savings would be gone very quickly. It would take almost everything I have, so it's not possible. But with a retraining program, maybe I could gain accounting knowledge, and I might be able to do some accounting stuff from home, because if there are employers who do that, because I've always been so good with numbers that potentially, even though I have trouble focusing and reduced attention to detail, if I check over things enough times, again, accommodations, because I would probably need like a reduced workload, but I might still be able to. I'm getting beyond the point. The point is what was my point? It's a difficult situation. The United States is horribly oppressive to its poor. The criminal justice system is a farce, and it's really about, well, sadism and oppression and keeping groups down, including the poor. Because what they don't want is like something like the Black Panthers emerging in from the urban black poor, or some like socialist workers party from like the working poor and the and like maybe even disabled, although a lot of socialist organizations are Marxist-Leninists, and historically Marx had some shitty views towards disabled people that were even worse than Lenin's views. I mean, he wasn't a perfect human being. He was actually Marx was less bigoted than most of his like colleagues in the time in Germany at that time. But he was you could make he was a product of his time argument. Same people do about America's founding fathers. That only goes so far, though. He wasn't a perfect human being. It doesn't mean his theories, though, like how economies work, are wrong. It just means that personally he was a little bit of a shitty person at times. But everyone was a shitty person at that time. Is the problem. But Lenin was worse, and Lenin famously said, "You does not work, will not eat." And while the Soviet government later qualified that as making exceptions for disabled people, the way Lenin did it very early on, right after the Russian Revolution, led to some disabled people literally starving to death before the government eventually created welfare systems for them. So, seeing like a socialist organization, the working poor are too often brainwashed into right-wing shit, and disabled people who tend to be a little more aware that the system is shit tend to not be accepted by. So I don't think, but that the biggest danger I think the government is afraid of is like another Black Panther Party, because African American people are nowadays very highly educated, more than they were back then, are aware of their oppression, are still being kept down. A lot of them, I mean, Obama may become president, but the vast majority of African Americans are still horribly oppressed. I've had roommates who had master's degrees, were very smart and hardworking. They were like being forced to live in slum areas because a lot of landlords wouldn't take. Essentially, there was racial discrimination in housing. That was not where I live now. It was in a different part of the country that was more racist than where I live now. But the point is these things are still going on. And so how do does the government prevent this? It criminalizes a lot of poverty, and it criminalizes Black people, and then it throws them into jails designed to break their willpower and turn them into career criminals if possible, so that they won't go and like form another Black Panther Party. It's a horrible system. Alright, well anyways, enough of this. I hope that some of what I said was enlightening. I hope that you folks enjoyed my video. Take care of each other, be kind to yourselves, and that you may always find a guiding star to lead you on. Until next time, it's Northstar. I do. Best luck.